So I just watched Prey on Disney Plus the other day, and it was fine.
Shut your stupid.
It definitely wasn't a bad movie. I actually quite enjoyed it, and I'm probably going to watch it again in the future. But it's not as good as everyone's making it out to be. I've seen on the internet that people have been saying it's a solid 10 out of 10. It's the best Predator movie since the original, and some even go as far as to say it's better than the original.
What the fuck?
Prey doesn't do or say anything that hasn't already been said before. It tells a very simple story of a Comanche tribeswoman called Naru who is determined to break away from the patriarchal rules of her tribe and become a warrior. After failing her first attempt at a lion, she's given another opportunity when a mysterious threat lands in the area, which we all know is the Predator at this point. Like I said, man, the plot isn't doing anything that we haven't already seen in cinema before. It's very surface level with on-the-nose implications with the dialogue and how some of the scenes are shot. The underdog rising to the occasion and ultimately proving everyone wrong is something we've seen a million times before, and to be completely honest, I'm fine with that. I'm glad they didn't go down the road of making this a pretentious and obnoxious narrative filled with too many subplots, character arcs, and bloated dialogue that doesn't actually say anything worthwhile. Prey knows exactly what it is, and it tells it well. The characters aren't very interesting though. There's no real personality to any of them other than base level observations like macho man that doesn't like listening to girls, the smart and athletic older brother, and the main protagonist doesn't have any other personality traits besides wanting to be a hunter and prove everyone wrong. I did like the relationship between her and the dog, however. I like the fact that the director didn't try and tug at our heartstrings with a cheap death of the dog or anything, but one of the main things that made the original film so good were the characters. They each had their own individual personalities that weren't necessarily relatable, but goddamn were they likable. Each member of the crew left a unique impression on the viewer that made an impact, so when it came time for them to die, the viewer actually felt something. I remember the first time I watched the original film, I was feeling anxious the whole time knowing that I'm going to have to watch these characters die. And I'm not saying that the first film was perfect, you know, there was a bunch of cheesy dialogue, it was corny, and it had typical action movie schlop in it, but that's what helped make it so much fun to watch. It had like a semi-serious tone, but at the same time it didn't take itself so seriously, and the performances from all the actors really nailed that home. Whereas with Prey, there isn't any time for proper character development. We know nothing about a lot of the characters we're introduced to, so it's hard to feel anything when they die. There's no character-viewer connection, which I think hurts the film a little bit in that regard. The tone of the movie is something I can appreciate though. It's very consistent and doesn't rely on shock horror or cheap jump scares. There's nothing I hate more than being sent on an emotional roller coaster for no real reason. The pacing of this movie was also very good. The first act was definitely the more interesting part of the movie, with it kind of dragging on a little bit too long in the second act, but overall it felt very well paced. It had plenty of action and gore, which was fun as hell to watch. The fight scenes were wonderfully choreographed, and the reveal of the Predator was so cool. I'm glad they didn't drag that reveal of the Predator out too long, because, you know, at this point we all know what it is, and I actually don't mind that the Predator looks different this time around. I love the aesthetic of its helmet. It's very archaic and it suits the overall look of the film, and I'm really glad that they didn't go full girl power on this one. Naru is a very intelligent, strong and athletic woman, and the movie lets that speak for itself rather than shoving social commentary in our faces, which would just cheapen the movie and suck me out of the experience. She's not perfectly written, and it does get kind of cheesy at times. This is a Predator film after all, but it's refreshing to see modern political topics not forced into a film for the sake of, like, inclusivity, I guess. You could read into some of these scenes and exchanges between Naru and the other tribesmen and come to the conclusion that there is some implied commentary in regards to feminism and the patriarchy, but I didn't really get that impression. It's something that was, like, there, but it was vague. It wasn't really a big deal. Everyone was on even footing. The film didn't go out of its way to make, like, the men feel weak and useless, with Naru being the only hope. The fight scenes between her and the Predator were actually kind of believable, in the sense that she wasn't like 1v1ing her in a straight up fist fight. She had to use her brain and outsmart the thing by placing traps and using weapons, using people as bait, and applying her knowledge of the land as an advantage. I will say, without spoiling anything, that the way she killed the Predator was a bit dumb. In no way do I think that would actually work, and I don't think the Predator would be that dumb. But anyway, coming back to the aesthetic of the film for a moment, I love the color contrast of the environment and the Predator's blood in some of these scenes. There's also a scene where they're in a burnt section of the woods with all this ash and dead trees everywhere, which really suited the Predator well. I think it looked cool as fuck. That's really all I can say there. It's not that deep, it's just cool. So anyway, there's really not much else I want to say about the movie because I don't want to spoil anything, but I do recommend you watch it. Even though the dialogue can be terrible at times and there are a couple cheap moments of nostalgia throwback to the original film that feels very forced, Prey is still very enjoyable. It's violent, the action is fun to watch, and the pacing is very well done. Overall, I'm going to give it a 6, maybe 7 out of 10.